So I wanted to create this video to show some of the differences in the types of research articles that you're going to find either through our library or Google Scholar and any of the other databases. And the types of articles we're looking for are pretty specific because we want to make sure we are reporting within the writing that we're doing this semester on current research that has just occurred within a given field. And so research is conducted in many ways, and we're looking for primary research that's conducted with methods. We're looking for the results so that we can get the most up to date. It's kind of like if you think of telephone, we want to go straight to the source rather than hearing it from someone else writing about the source. And so some of the articles that you'll find will do that in a meta-analysis or review article. They are talking about other studies, other published articles, other published research. And those ones are more difficult to write about. So that's another good reason to not choose them. But they're also not the original primary research. So we want to make sure that we're steering clear of these just because it can get really confusing. If you find one that you just think is fascinating, I can help you work through how that looks differently in terms of organization and structure when we write about them. But otherwise, just some things to look for if you want to avoid them, because it is a lot of extra work to try to explain to readers how this study is talking about another study, because it's already getting a little bit confusing if you haven't noticed with you are writing an article about a study. So this just kind of helps to simplify things. And the first thing that you want to look for is a meta-analysis. Usually it's in the title, but sometimes it's not. You'll have to go into the abstract and look. And a meta-analysis is just looking at a bunch of studies to compare and contrast the outcomes. So it can be a little tricky to know, but if you go through into the methods or the materials, they'll say instead of how many participants or subjects, how many studies they found that fulfilled their criteria. So they're looking at 17 to 60 studies. So imagine trying to explain in your article the methods and findings of even 17 different studies. It gets a little complicated. So these are ones to steer clear from. If you do like this topic, something I suggest is to go down to the references and see if you can find any of these sources that they're talking about. Because likely this article will help explain those. You could still use some context from this article, this meta-analysis. But these ones are going to be the more specific studies that took place within a specific amount of time on a specific number of participants or subjects. The next thing that you can look for, and these are all scholarly academic journal articles so that you can see kind of the variety of formats and layouts. This one is a primary a primary research study. So they are looking at these cells, which are part of the coronavirus, and how they react to something. So you're not always going to have participants or people or patients as the subjects, but sometimes it's cells or bacteria, anything that the researchers are testing differences on. So how does it react in this case? Or how does it react if it's exposed to something else? And so these are varying lengths. This one is pretty short. You'll see the methods. They say that they have these 7 different fluid specimens that they're using to test. They have this timeline of 4 to 6 weeks and the different things that they're testing for. Then they'll have the results. These images can be really helpful to remember to save for when you're writing your own articles. And often they'll talk about patients, and sometimes if there's just a few, which that means that the research is pretty new, if there's only a few, less than 10 cases that they're researching, because they don't want to hurt a bunch of people unknowingly if they're going to test something. So this is kind of the first phase, and then you can say, it only occurred within 3 people, but that was good news, and now we can continue to expand. So you can kind of start to see where the topic is, how new it is. Obviously, coronavirus, these studies are coming out are pretty new in terms of the scope and participants that they are allowed to have. So that's what one would look like. And here's another article that you would want to steer clear of, and it does say review article here, but this one is reviewing, whoops, other applications, future prospects, but it's not testing anything specifically. So we can look and kind of go through and see, all right, they're looking at these different things that other people have looked at, these other applications, maybe these other instruments that people are using, and saying perhaps where their future research will go or where they believe the field's future research will go, but not actually testing that out. So that's another one of the differences to look for. This one is another review. So if you're lucky, it'll be up in a few different places. You can kind of catch it. Sometimes it's not listed in the abstract though. And so if you do find one like this that you're just not quite sure of, feel free to just email it to me and I will check it out for you. Sometimes it is hard to tell until you really get down into the nitty-gritty details of the study. So I'm happy to help you differentiate those. And lastly, this is another study that would be appropriate to write about. And so this is a popular format that you'll see, especially if you're using the database Elsevier. But in here, it even tells you how many patients, how many participants. They're comparing, contrasting the methods and the results of this group that they are testing. So that's something that hopefully you'll be able to see right away when you find an article. It should be somewhere in the title, if not the abstract. And then if you're just not sure, go ahead and email those to me so that I can help you look through and make sure that it's just going to be a simple study that you can explain to others, because if it gets too complex, especially for your first time in interpreting these scientific academic articles, it can really get overwhelming. So that's why we try to limit it to these specific studies. But again, if you want to test the waters, feel free, and I'm happy to help you do that as well.